All right. Well, I'm glad y'all are here. If y'all are warm or cool or anything, I turned the AC down just to get it it was a little stuffy in here. But if anybody gets cold or if you get hot, just feel free to go turn up. Probably either one of those would cool it down or warm it up if you get cold. Um, okay, well, I know we're running a little late tonight, so we'll get started. Let's pray, and then I've got a couple of things I want to mention, and then we'll get started. God, we just thank you for bringing us here today. God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your son. We thank you, Jesus, for just sacrificing for us so that we can be redeemed, that we can be restored back to our relationship with you and eventually back to eternity with you. God, we just ask that you would open our hearts and our minds to your truth, and that we would just open your word and discuss the things that we have learned and thought about this week, and that we would just honor you with everything we do and say and think tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, a couple of things. We've got, I hate that. Sorry, it just bugs me. I hate that when I breathe, it sounds. Okay, we record it, which is why we have the microphones, and I think we were just talking about that. The microphones are not so that we all can hear, but they're because you don't hear a thing on the recording. Have you found that? And you can tell when somebody's talking if they don't have the microphone. All you see is me going, uh-huh. So, so it's not real informative. So that's why. So I've got one up here, and I've got four of them, I think, scattered around. I think. Do what? Yes, and put them up to your mouth so that we can hear you. And okay, also, since we do record it, it is online. It's on the same place that on YouTube, on the same place that you can find the Sunday sermons and all that. But I also put the handouts now online, and I'm going to try to keep up with those because there's a few people that, if you're watching, hi. But if there's a few people that it seems like I'm always somebody sends me an email, did you send the handouts? Oh, I forgot. So I'm just going to try to keep them online, and that way they'll be there. So as soon as I get them ready, I'll just upload them online. So I think I've already got this week's on there. But anyway, but if you go to our website, I think it's Pecan Church. So it's pecan.church is our website, and just /women, you should find it there. Or you can, I'll try to put a link in the comments. I think you can do that on YouTube. I'm not real YouTube savvy, so I think you can do that on YouTube in the comments to put the link to it too. So I'll try to do that. Okay, so if you missed anything. All right, so was there any other announcements? I don't think I had anything else. Okay. Last week we started with, y'all still have this, and if you didn't get this, if you weren't here last week, the handouts, if you didn't pick one up, there's last week's handouts back there also, and you'll need it because we're going to continue. We just did the one half of this last week, and so we're going to continue this week. So there's two sets of handouts back there, last week's and then this week's. So this week's is just one. It's just the practice thing. But before we get started on that, let's look at our practice. Oh, I call it that because it's not homework. From last week, there's also one back there if you didn't get it. That's we were looking at the Genesis 25 and 26, 27, 28, all in there. Through the lens of story structure. So this, let me get back there. Oh, I lost my paper clips. All right. So we're talking about Jacob and Esau in this. So when we look at, and I put the specific scriptures because there's some like genealogies in there that you can kind of skip over as far as the storyline goes. The genealogies are important, but as far as the storyline goes, I didn't want you to get confused with that. So we're starting at like 25:19, verse 19 of chapter 25 in Genesis. And we're looking at the birth of Esau and Jacob. And then going on through into 26, toward the end, right at the last of 26, there is, oh wait, did I have the right? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry, because it switches over to Isaac and Abimelech in there. Okay, so then the end of 26 and then all of 27 and a little bit into 28. Okay, so what's the setting here? Did anybody? What is the setting? What are we? Where are they? Does anybody know? Or what? Okay, we're looking. Oh, sorry. Somebody gonna say something. I thought.
This is really deep. I said they were at Isaac and Rebecca's home.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There you go. That's good. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good place, I guess, when they're giving birth. When she's giving birth. So, what's were there any specific phrases or parts or verses that kind of made you think, there may be a conflict coming up, or is the setting, is there tension, is there general contentment? When we start out the story, what are we?
Well, first she's can't have a baby. First
Right.
she's barren. So then Isaac prays and she gets pregnant, but then it's not a very easy pregnancy. And then when you hear that the babies are jostling and she inquires of the Lord and he says, 2 nations are in your womb, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And then even verse 28 of chapter 25, Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So that's also one that's giving you a little bit of
yeah.
not really foreshadowing, but a little bit of an idea that something's coming up. Something's not exactly. Okay. So then who are our characters? We said Jacob and Esau. Who else? We've got
Isaac and Rebecca.
Isaac and Rebekah. God, right? Okay. So then what are they doing? So we talked about the birth, right? We've got the birth of the two. And then let's see. So then we go on to in 29 of chapter 25, where there starts to be a little more conflict. So we could kind of take these in parts. You could almost go through different settings for each part of this, but we're just going to look in general. So okay, so what are the characters doing there? So Jacob and Esau weren't really doing much when they were born, but what are they? So what are they doing here? They're older. Yeah, yeah, having kids. They're so Esau was out hunting, and he comes in, and
Jacob was cooking.
Jacob was cooking. Yeah.
It appears that this is laying down a foreshadowing
Yeah.
of the 2 nations, because this is where Jacob starts to do some things that aren't really kosher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what we say?
Yeah. Yeah. That even though God does bless him, he doesn't go about things the right way. As far as, but God can make good out of anything. Yeah. So he essentially. So I think of the drama. I think of Esau coming in. I'm about to die. I'm so hungry, and so Jacob takes advantage of that, and says, okay. So you kind of see that manipulating, kind of the wheels turning in Jacob already. Okay, so then I guess let's just kind of talk about all the conflict, the turning points. So then we move on after that we skip over to 2634, so toward the end of it, because it goes on with some other stories that aren't, sorry. About my luck, I'd have to buy another one of these if I don't watch it. Okay, so then it skips on to, let's look at we're at the very end of 26. So that verse 34, Esau was 40 years old, so we know they're not just kids at this point anyway. So he's taken a wife, and what does it say? Somebody want to read 34 and 35? Somebody want to?
When Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and also Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite. They were a source of grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
Yeah. So that also is another, just that phrase, those one little groups of words tell us kind of I always say, dun, dun, dun. It's our getting ready for we know something's coming up. So we've got some different themes already woven in. We've got the favoritism, already woven in, and then we've got the fact that Esau has married foreign wives, and we don't know if they grieved them because it was foreign wives or if their person, it doesn't say why.
Troublemakers.
Yeah, or if they were troublemakers. We don't know why, but we do know that mine says they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. So yeah, it's definitely, so okay, so we see that kind of coming in. So we also see some other characters added, Judith and Basemath, that, so. Okay, so then we go on into 27. So now we're saying when Isaac was old. Okay, so what happens here? What's the setting here? Where are they? I'm sorry.
Aren't they at his deathbed?
Yeah, I think, it says his eyes were dim, so yeah, he's definitely older. So yeah, and he brings them in, and okay, so what's the conflict here then? Or what becomes the conflict?
It's time he's going to give the blessing, which would be normally the blessing to the firstborn.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he's already given away his birthright, which I'm
Right.
not totally sure what that entailed.
I know. I'm
Yeah.
the same way. I'm not real sure the difference
Yeah,
between the
but
birthright
now-
and the blessing, but I think it has to do with an inheritance,
Yeah.
maybe.
So now it's time to give the blessing.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Martha, did you have something?
Wouldn't it be the ancestral line of like a redeemer, that he could not be a redeemer because he didn't have the birthright
Could be. It could be. Yeah.
to do so?
I didn't really research that a lot, so I don't know. Yeah, that could be. It could be, which would it wouldn't surprise me because that would go along with, God is so good to weave all these layers of things into stories, so it could be. Okay, so he's going to bless them. So this seems like, okay, this is a normal thing, right? This is something, but then what do we have that happens? Yeah, yeah. Yes, Rebecca steps in. Do you have a microphone over there? But yeah, Rebecca steps in, and we see, that she favored Jacob, but she's also very manipulative. Doesn't hesitate to come up with a plan to help him deceive. So we see the conflict there. So the conflict there is really kind of it's kind of Jacob and Rebecca against Esau and Isaac. Is kind of how it. So is there anything that you saw in that was any phrases? It says Rebecca was listening when Isaac spoke. So when Esau went to the field, Rebecca says to her son Jacob, "I heard your father speak." So she makes the plan. What else then?
Well, she says, because he knows he's going to get in trouble, and he's afraid he's going to get cursed, and she says, "Let the curse fall on me."
Yeah.
Which is pretty serious.
Yeah, she's
Just
even
do what
willing.
I say and go get it.
Right.
Do what I'm telling you to do, and I'll take the blame, I guess. But she didn't.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
end up on her. But.
Yeah, she's willing to, or she says she is, but yeah. Okay. So then did they go through with it? They go through with the plan. One thing I noticed that, let's see, where is it? Verse 20, I guess. So chapter 27, verse 20. So when Jacob is talking to Isaac, he has he's brought him the food, and he's got the skins on, so his arms feel hairy like Esau's were. But so verse 20, Isaac said to his son, "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" And he answered, "Because the Lord your God granted me success." And that to me stood out because I thought, oh my goodness, that's to me I would be thinking, just strike me dead right now. That's such a blatant, using God as an excuse to lie to his father. That's true. See, I did not even, you're right. The Lord, your God. Yeah. See, I didn't even pick up on that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the Lord your God. Yep. Okay, so then verse 23, he blesses him in the end of verse 23. And then he still says, "Are you really my son?" And okay, so what else happens here? So as soon as he goes through the blessing, verse 28, 29, 26 through 29, kind of right there. And then verse 30 is like one kind of a turning point in that you're thinking, okay, he's getting away with this, but the soap opera continues. So what happens at verse 30 of 27, chapter 27?
Here comes Jacob.
Here comes Jacob.
No, I mean Esau.
I mean
not
Esau.
Jacob.
Yeah, you're right.
Here
Yeah.
comes Esau.
I knew what you meant. I said
Yeah.
the same thing. Yes. Yeah. As soon as Isaac had
his
finished.
stew.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, when Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, Esau his brother came in. I may be reading this out of a different translation than y'all have. I don't want to confuse you. But yeah, this is chapter 27, verse 30. So yeah, he comes in, and we know what's probably going to happen. He's going to find out. So what happens? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He fixes all his food, brings it in, and Isaac says, "Who are you? Who was that?" And what? Yeah, so he realizes what's happened. He's come deceitfully. And, I think, we would, if you don't know the story, you'd kind of think, oh, is he just going to reverse the blessing? Or, but what does he do? He doesn't reverse the blessing. He tells him, what does he tell Esau?
Can't reverse it, it must stand.
Right, he can't
Whatever
reverse it.
reason
It
can't.
must stand. Yeah. Yeah, he says, behold, I have made him Lord over you. This is verse 37, Isaac answered to Esau. So then I kind of felt sorry for Esau here. You kind of think, yeah, you think, oh. But you wonder, there's got to be some underlying things that, aren't written in, because earlier it said he despised his birthright, when he sold his birthright back in 25. So, yeah, so you think, okay, and the fact that he would sell it and not, but here you kind of feel sorry. But you know that God's ways are perfect. He's got things, he knows things we don't. But it does. It's just that storyline of it pulls at your heart. You kind of think, oh. Okay, so then we go on through to right at the beginning of 28. So the rest of this. So Esau has what says a blessing, but I'm sorry, let me skip back. Chapter 27, verse 39 through 40, and 41, where he tells Esau that things are not going to necessarily go well for him, that he's going to serve his brother. So then, verse 41, Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing. And then, what else happens? Really, kind of just going through the first part of 28. Okay, so we're at the point where Jacob is a little scared for his life. So I'm sorry, Martha. What were you? Or
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
microphone. Sorry, can you use? Sorry. Thanks.
Is that right? Okay. No, I was just going to say that Rebecca did it again, and so Jacob went away, but he takes a wife, does he not?
Well,
And-
not here. That's the reason that she uses to send him away,
Right.
as far as what they tell his father. That he's fleeing from Esau, but he's also going because she says, I can't bear it if you marry one of these Hittite women. So, like Esau had done. I don't know who I said, but I meant Jacob. I don't know if I just said Esau. But anyway, that if Jacob marries him like Esau had done. Yeah, so here again, yeah, you're right. There's that manipulate. Somebody said Rebecca gets involved again, and that's exactly, she comes up with this plan and still deceives, Isaac, even in the fact that she's making some plan for him to be able to escape, but instead of just saying, she said, like you had said, Jody, she said she'd take the blame, but she doesn't ever she keeps having to, lie to cover it. Isn't that the way it is when if you do something and you find yourself, at some point you just got to go, okay, I fess up because I'm getting in too deep. Lies have to keep coming.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when
Yes,
first we
exactly.
practice to deceive.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So now Esau took a wife there in verse 6. It goes on into that, but we're just going to stop there at the end. So, all right. So from the beginning to the end, how does the mood kind of change? I mean, I see kind of, this. We kind of see a roller coaster. But at the very beginning, we see the birth of the boys. And we know there's some tension, but a birth is always a celebrated, thing. And so and then by the end of it, how's the mood of the story by the end of our section, at least? It switches.
It's tension and conflict and
Yeah.
fighting
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
separation. One of them's
Yeah.
having to leave
Yeah.
the home.
Yeah. For twin boys to have
Yeah.
to separate. Yeah. So what about an application or a theme? How would you describe like the moral of the story or morals or what different? Just give me some couple of word things that.
Okay, I said God's plans can't be thwarted first, but then also parent favoritism has a detrimental effect on siblings.
It does. Yes, it does. It does. It's good. Anybody else? All right. Well, we'll go on to, I think that's good. I just kind of wanted to go over that some. I just love the way of reading it in the midst of a story. Okay, so now we're going to look at the second side of this life of Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, which is more on Joseph now. So let's skip on over to 37 is where we start. We ended with 35 last week, Genesis 35. So 36 goes into kind of some genealogies and some descendants. So we're going to just start with 37. So Joseph's dream. So who is Joseph now? Who is he? Where is he in the lineage? I think he was 11. Yeah. Yep. So, and if y'all had this gives you it's hard for me to keep it all straight, even though I think I know it, and then I'll go. But yeah, so Joseph and Benjamin were both Rachel's, and we know that Jacob loved Rachel. He loved, we see by the way he takes care of Leah that he loves Leah, but we know that Rachel was his first choice. That was who he wanted to marry. So he's very partial to Joseph and to Benjamin, and we'll see that in all through this whole story. So, okay. So, Joseph, starting in 37, Joseph has dreams. His brothers sell him. I had to abbreviate some of that to get it. So his bros sell him. And then he ends up in Egypt. So we know that he is sold, and that's something against, this is an offense against him. He suffers, but yet we see throughout the whole story of how God makes good out of this. And I think it was it Good Friday service that Steve talked about? He said the family that settled in Egypt, and I was just thinking, this is the start. This is how they first, got to Egypt, was through him being sold. But we see so many in the story of how it turns out it was, they ended up in Egypt eventually because of the famine, to survive. But then they ended up, as years went by, they multiplied, so they then were oppressed, and the whole family. Okay, so Joseph has dreams. His brothers sell him, and he ends up getting sold to, goes to Egypt, ends up being Potiphar's slave. So, okay, so then Judah and Tamar are in there too. And what's important, Judah and Tamar, that story is, and this is 38. And who is Judah?
One of the sons.
one of the sons. He's also one of the
Jacob's sons.
right. Yeah, and he was from Leah. That's right. He was one of the sons from Leah, and so it goes through. Eventually, he ends up his daughter-in-law. His daughter-in-law gets pregnant through a whole thing.
That's a story.
That's a story. It's a story in itself. Yeah, you could go back through and read. I'm not going to take the time just for time today, but so it ends up they have twins. She has twins, and I'm sorry, not twins. She has two sons. They're not twins. She has or wait, they are twins. Sorry, I got mixed up. Sorry. Yes, they are twins. Yeah, I put it right there. Perez and Zerah. That's how you say it. But does anybody know what's so important about those and why that story is in there, or one of the reasons?
Isn't the Messiah?
Yes, Perez is
Perez.
direct lineage of the Messiah, of Jesus. So, God uses all these situations we see, and that gives me hope. It gives me hope to know that if He can use all these messed up people to get to get to Jesus, that okay, there's hope. He can use me. Okay, so that's why I put that in there, because that's the main importance that I see out of that. So then Joseph, so he's sold as a slave to Potiphar, who is captain of the guard, I think. Yeah, captain of the guard for Pharaoh, and Potiphar puts him in charge of his house. So evidently Joseph is very discerning and maybe orderly, and God gives him success, and He's given him that wisdom, and he has success, and he puts him over his whole house. He knows he can trust him. So then what happens with Potiphar's wife? Yeah, Martha's getting the microphone.
She accuses him of bad intentions.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. She accuses him of bad intentions, yes, which was really her doing in the first place. She's begging him to try to, yeah.
She was enticing.
She was enticing, yes, those are good words.
Geez.
Yeah.
Eve really did a number on us, didn't she?
No.
I mean, that woman.
Bless her heart. Oh, but we see Joseph he refuses, and she keeps at it, and finally she catches his cloak when he's fleeing, and then she accuses him of bad things. Yeah. And makes it public. So Potiphar has to deal with it, even if one thing I was our BSF, if anybody Bible study fellowship. Anyway, our lesson this last week actually was the same one. And one thing that was mentioned that he could have put him to death. The standard punishment for a slave, offending his wife in that way, would have been death. And so, really, Potiphar, I wonder if he knew, if he had an idea, because he puts him in prison instead, and doesn't put him to death. So, so you wonder, but he has to deal with it since she makes this accusation. The household people are all involved, and he has to do something. So he's put in prison. So poor Joseph. Here we go again. He was put in the well, in the dry well, and then he was sold, and then he finally he's still a slave, but now he's in prison. So it's another roller coaster here. Okay, so while he's in prison, there are the cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh are also, and it just says they offended him. We don't know what they did, but they're also in prison. So this gives Joseph, too many names, I gotta keep straight. Joseph is, once again, he rises in his integrity, I'm sure, and God helps him succeed to where he's in charge of some of the prisoners now. And these two, the cupbearer and the baker, are put in his charge, and they have dreams, and they've said, I've got these dreams, and Joseph interprets them. And what is it? One of them's good, one of them's bad, right? Yeah. So we know one of them, he says, oh, you're going to be reinstated to your, I think that was the cupbearer. Yeah, it was the cupbearer. He says, you're going to be reinstated to your position. After he interprets his dream, the baker, he says, you're going to be decapitated. And he asks one thing that's important, he asked the cupbearer to remember him, and this is a bit, yeah. I can't remember where it is, but anyway, it's in 40 there somewhere. He asked the cupbearer to remember him when he is, reinstated, and to help him to put in a good word for him and help him get out of prison. And then the very last sentence or verse in chapter 40, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. So poor Joseph is now forgotten again. And then, now we don't know how long it was that he was in Potiphar's house or how long he had been in prison. Now we know at the beginning of chapter 40, it says sometime after this. So he's already been in prison a while. Sometime after this, the cupbearer and the baker had committed offense, and they were put in his charge. So we know he's been in there sometime, but we don't know how long. But that indicates not a day or two. It's been longer than that probably. Then the beginning of 40, after 2 whole years. 2 whole years. So this is after the cupbearer and the baker incident. 2 years later, we see he is still in prison, and we see that Pharaoh has a dream. So Pharaoh has a dream, and then he tries to get his people to interpret it, and he finally hears that Joseph can interpret dreams, and he calls him in, and he interprets his dream. And so what's the dream, or the dreams? There's 2, but what are the dreams then essentially about?
But Lori, a little bit prior to that,
Did I mix?
because it was the cupbearer that told that spoke to the Pharaoh about the dream. So
That's right.
could we not interpret that he did remember Joseph?
Yeah, and it does say, where is that? It does. I should have marked that. I've got a lot of stuff marked, but I didn't. Yeah, there was.
And verse 9 of chapter 41.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Then the cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses. Yes, verse 9, chapter 41. Thank you, Martha. And the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, I remember my offenses today. So whether he really forgot, or he just now goes, oh, okay, because this could play good on him too. He can put in a good word for somebody to the Pharaoh. So, I don't know. So when Pharaoh was angry with his servants, he put me and the chief baker in custody. We dreamed, and he goes on and tells him, a young Hebrew, verse 12, a young Hebrew was there with us, and he interpreted our dreams, giving a correct interpretation. So yeah, thank you, Martha. Yeah, the cupbearer does finally remember, however we want to interpret that, but he is the one that at least tells. So we see all these things playing on top of each other. We see the layers of things that happened, and how the things that come out from those things. Okay, good, thanks. All right, so he interprets the dreams, and the dreams are that they're basically going to be seven years of abundance and 7 years of famine. 7 lean years, 7 skinny years. No, what is it? 7 lean years and 7. Is it years of plenty? Or so, there's different versions say it different ways, but yeah. So we know then that so Joseph rises to power after he interprets that dream. Verse 37, this proposal, because he gives them some advice too. After he doesn't just interpret the dream, he gives them some advice. And then he says, verse 37, it says, this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? So he recognizes, and he admits at least, that this is that God's doing. And Joseph said that back in verse 25 of 41. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. This is when he starts to interpret it. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. So he does, and there's a few different places in there where he refers to. So he lets Pharaoh know that this is God's the one that's getting credit for this. Okay, so he rises to power because Pharaoh, because God helps him succeed. But God uses Pharaoh to appoint him. Essentially, he makes his way up to, I've heard it called assistant governor or something. I don't know that it's actually that term in here, but I've heard it called similar to that or something, that he rises in power in the, yes, second only to Pharaoh. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's always, God always works in ways to give himself, to bring the glory and to let people know. I mean, throughout, when we get into Exodus and some of this throughout, it's constantly, so that you will, when we go through the plagues and things like that, it's so that you will know, or so that the Egyptians will know that there is a God, that I am God. And so he does things, yes, that's the whole point of a lot of the things that he does. Okay, so he rises to power and he marries Asenath. I don't know how to say that, but that's in 41:45. I always like to get names of, I don't remember them all, but I like to get the names of just to track things. So then the 7 years of abundance begins in 41:47. So the 7 years of abundance are first, and he is told Pharaoh to, save back a fifth, I believe it was, of the grain, and to store it back for the years that are going to come with the 7 years of famine. In between there, Joseph's two sons are born, Manasseh and Ephraim, or Ephraim, however we say those. And we'll see some more about them a little later when we get into Jacob actually blessing his sons, and that would be his grandsons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So we'll see that. But so his sons were born during the time of abundance, and then they go into the famine. So he's already got this family, besides his family that's still in Canaan, he's got his own family now also in Egypt. So then the 7 years of famine begin in 41:53, and 53. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph has said. So he then starts distributing the grain, and then Jacob. So now we kind of flip over to Jacob in chapter 22, but this is Joseph's brothers and his dad, right? His family that's there. So Jacob, they're getting hungry. The famine has reached them too, and he sends his 10 of his sons to go buy the grain. And okay, so what happens there? What do y'all anything from that you? This is chapter 42. So he sends. So who does he not send? Maybe put it that way. Benjamin. He does not send Benjamin. Benjamin and Joseph are very much his favored. They're the two that were direct, his children with Rachel. So he does not send Benjamin. He says, I've already lost one. He thinks at this point Joseph is dead. So he does not send. So he sends his 10 other sons, and so they go, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. But they return without Simeon. They buy grain, and they return without Simeon because Joseph says, "Okay, I'm going to keep one of you because I want you to bring back." He's testing him, and he says, "I want you to bring back because he doesn't tell them who he is, but they tell him that he still has another son." Yes, he recognizes them. Yeah, that's important to note. Yeah, he recognizes them, and he knows, but he doesn't want to let them know that he knows because he doesn't want them yet. So he says, Simeon's going to stay here to make sure that y'all bring back Benjamin. So then Jacob sends his sons again to Egypt, including Benjamin. This is in 43. Now he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to send, but they go back and forth and talk through it. And he goes back through and he sends them, including Benjamin. And then Joseph prepares a feast with his brothers, and they still don't know his identity. This is in 43, verse 16. So he's still testing them. And then he plants the cup. So verse 44, where he takes and he plants a cup, his cup, in Benjamin's sack. And then he has somebody, after they leave, he has somebody go and accuse them of it, and he says nobody would, or the brothers say nobody would do this anyway. They find it in Benjamin's, they bring him back, they find it in Benjamin's, and then Judah steps up for Benjamin, which if we remember back to when they were put in the well, when he was, where's that, 30, anyway, yeah, that Reuben and Judah were two that were very much on the planning, or at least they're mentioned as far as ones that were very into planning him being sold. So Judah steps up for Benjamin, and that's what Jacob was testing him to see if they had, if they had changed or not. Exactly. Yeah. So he steps up and says, "Take me instead." And then Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers in chapter 45, and that's just such a sweet. I love some of the parts of that. It's just 45 starts off. Joseph could not control himself, so he was very. And it had mentioned a couple of times before this that he had wept. He had gone off by himself to just weep over seeing his brothers.
Judah
yes.
was the one who wouldn't let him kill him.
That's right.
The brothers wanted to kill him, and Judah
would not let him kill him.
Yeah,
That's right.
He was the one who said, "You can sell him."
That's right. Yeah, sell him. Yeah, he was the one that came up with the idea to sell him. Yeah, that's right. So really, he was sort of protecting him in some way. Okay. So and then verse 45, verse 5 goes on. The end of verse 5. God sent me before you to preserve life. He's giving God all the credit. Verse 7, and God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. 50:20, I'm just going to skip over there just real quick, is one of my favorite verses ever. And it's chapter 50, verse 20, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. And I just love that verse. It's one of my favorite verses. That God just turns everything for the good. He can take what seems like the worst of situations. Okay. So back to 45, verse 8. It was not you who sent me here, but God. So he just, talk about forgiving and just his humility, and you see, but you also see the change in him too from the beginning. I kind of saw him as a little bit arrogant when he was younger. When he came out to his brothers, he wore his coat out to the field. To kind of, you felt like he was showing off, and he was so. God has done all this. And has molded his character through all these things, and we see him here, just such a different person also. So humble and giving God all the credit and seeing the good in things. And okay, so let's see. He reveals his identity. So then Joseph offers his family protection in Egypt, and then the brothers go back to get Jacob. And not only do they go back to get Jacob, but Pharaoh gives them carts to go get him, and just welcomes them in, and that's really knowing that this is where they're going to eventually be put into slavery. It's so ironic, to to read it with knowing what's going to happen, but Pharaoh here is just so good to them. So okay, so so he goes back, gets Jacob, and Jacob and his family return to Egypt, and Joseph and Jacob are reunited. So this is in 46, where Jacob and Jacob and Joseph are reunited, and that's a really beautiful chapter. The way it's described there, and God even tells the beginning of 46. God spoke to Israel in a vision that night and said, "Jacob," he said, "Here I am." Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. So he reassures him. God is so caring. He knows what we need. He reassures him, tells him not to be afraid, and he tells him, Joseph's going to be there even when you go on, when you die. So he assures him that Joseph is going to be there, the one to, when he has thought he's been dead for this whole time, or he thought Joseph was dead this whole time. All right, so Jacob's family settles in Goshen, and in 47, the first part of 47, so they give them this good land because they know they're shepherds. And there's also a couple of times it's mentioned that shepherds are an abomination to Egyptians. There at the end of 46 is one place. And so that's another, thing that he said, tell them your shepherds, and Joseph tells them, tell them your shepherds, tell Pharaoh your shepherds so that you can have, this land over here because they don't want you with them anyway because they're an abomination to Egyptians. So they come down, they settle in Goshen, they prosper, they multiply. God is just so good and blesses them. Let's see, then Joseph promises Jacob to bury him with his fathers. This is 47:29 through 31. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, if now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place, he answered. I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me, and he swore to him. And then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So he promises to carry his bones out of Egypt. And one of the things as Egyptians that they were known for their embalming. So I thought this was, and it even mentions, and this skips down toward the bottom of this where it says Joseph dies and Jacob dies and Joseph dies, and they were both embalmed. And I had not, at least I haven't seen it mentioned, there may, but I haven't seen it mentioned before this anywhere, so that allowed them then to be able to take his bones out of, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself though, okay. So he promises them to bury him not in Egypt, but in Canaan. And then Jacob blesses his sons and grandsons, and that's 48, 49. So he goes through, and I think we did a little bit of this last week, where we went through 49, and we went through each of the blessings and how appropriate they were for each of the sons. So you can look through that in 49. But backing up to 48, Joseph had the two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, right? And Manasseh was, okay, I'm trying to remember. Manasseh was the firstborn. Is that right? I didn't write that down. I'm trying to remember. Okay. Yeah, Manasseh was the firstborn. But when Jacob blesses them, and he says they will be as his own, counted as his own sons, he blesses them the opposite. He's putting their hand on the ones, and Jacob says, no. He's thinking he's old, can't see, I don't know. He tries to switch his hand, and he says, I know. I've got this, and I know that. Let's see, let me find where that is. Okay. Yeah, 17, 18, 19, right in there. So chapter 48, starting 17, he laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, and it displeased him. And so he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's hand. And Joseph said to his father, not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. So Manasseh, he was trying to say, no, you've got it mixed up. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. And I love that. He's like, I haven't lost it. It's okay. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So he blessed them that day. And he also says, I don't know if it's here. I can't remember where it was. I should have marked that. But where he says that he's going to count Ephraim and Manasseh as his own. He ends up, Joseph has other children later, but he counts those as his own, as direct descendants from Jacob. All right, so now back to the embalming. So Jacob dies, he's embalmed, and he's buried in Canaan. And then so Pharaoh lets him go back. And in fact, if you read that, there's this whole big entourage that goes with him. I mean, all these people that go with him. And you wonder if that's to some of the Egyptians, if that's to make sure they come back, or if it's really honoring, that would be my first thought. I would want to think that Pharaoh's just honoring them by all these people that just loved him. But, there may have been a two-purpose thing there, maybe to make sure they come back. So a bunch of people go with him. They all come back, so they bury him in Canaan. And then when Joseph dies, toward the end there of 50, he and we talked about that promise, And then if you skip ahead, Exodus 13:19, I just put that as a reference to where that's where we actually see that promise come true, that Moses actually takes Joseph's bones out of Egypt with him at the Exodus when they all go. So, all right, so that was our speed talk of Jacob and Joseph and Isaac somewhat. Okay, so next week we're going to go a little more, and like I said, I promise this won't keep going. We're not going to go through every person in the Bible. As much as I think it could be fun, it could be years. There's no way. Probably would never get through it. But the patriarchs that these are called, a lot of times are just so important. It lays the foundation of so many things that I just think it's important to go through these. So next week we're going to get a little more into, start with Exodus and look at Moses and see his family line and some of them, Joshua a little bit, some of those things. So, all right. Any questions? Oh, we've got don't forget you've got your practice session, practice. And I put a few of the stories of Joseph in here just by chapters. So just pick one, and I'll probably just get, we'll probably just, when we go through it, we'll just get, if people pick some different ones, we'll just kind of get you to briefly tell us what you came up with or something. But I love seeing these stories in the view of how they're written and how they make the reader feel. All right, so we'll pray and be dismissed. Father, we just ask that you would keep us safe as we go back to our homes and on our ways the rest of this week. God, we thank you for giving us this place to meet and just giving us the opportunity to gather and open your word. And we just thank you again for your word, that you give us your word so we can know you and we can just fall in love with you more every day and every time we open your word and every time we are able to just speak with you. God, we just ask that you would continue to bless this week, all of the things that we do, and help us to come back safely. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.